that our state faces, that our state leaders would rather instead spend money on an expensive and ineffective capital punishment system, instead of helping people get electricity back for their refrigerators, hot water heaters, oxygen tanks, and dialysis machines. Regardless of the creeds we follow, we are gathered here in this space, in the State House, to launch a petition addressed to South Carolina's Governor Henry McMaster. The petition reads as follows: Dear Governor McMaster, we come to you as religious and spiritual leaders living in South Carolina who believe strongly that the death penalty is racist, immoral, and cruel. As religious and spiritual leaders, we ask you to stop pursuing the death penalty for everyone on South Carolina's death row. State-sponsored execution is archaic and retributive practice that runs counter to our belief that every human being is sacred. For South Carolina to return to using its execution chamber, the people of our state would be no safer, but we would be morally and spiritually stained. We humbly ask that you use your power to ensure that executions will not be carried out in South Carolina. With such an action, you could lead South Carolina to a new vision of justice, mercy, and public safety. Thank you for considering our important request. Now, South Carolinians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty invites other speakers to come forward to add their comments to our petition's launch. We have Brian Pitchford, followed by Sister Pamela Smith, followed by Monsignor Droz, in that order. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Brian Pickford, and I am an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church. I serve the good people of Cokesbury United Methodist Church in North Charleston, South Carolina. I'm here to remind Governor McMaster and all our legislators, many of whom claim to follow Jesus with their lives too, that all life is sacred in the eyes of God. This is not just my personal opinion. This is the official stance of the United Methodist Church, which still has over 750 worshiping bodies in our great state. From our social principles, which are a part of our governing documents called the Book of Discipline, I quote, "We believe the death penalty denies the power of Christ to redeem, restore, and transform all human beings. The United Methodist Church is deeply concerned about crime throughout the world and the value of any life taken by a murder or suicide, or homicide, We believe all human life is sacred and created by God, and therefore we must see all human life as significant and valuable. When governments implement capital punishment, the life of the convicted person is devalued and all possibility of change in that person's life ends. We believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and that possibility of reconciliation with Christ comes through repentance. This gift of reconciliation is offered to all individuals without exception and gives all life new dignity and sacredness. For this reason, we oppose the death penalty and urge its elimination in all criminal codes. Now today I am wearing a stole that I affectionately call my protest stole. I wear this stole at significant events in the life of the church that I serve, such as baptisms, confirmations, and Holy Communion. I also bring it out at events like this. The lady who made this stole for me recognizes the value of all human life and has done so since she was a young girl. As a tween, she snuck from her home outside of Washington, D.C. to Selma, Alabama, to participate in Martin Luther King Jr.'s work. As a young lady, she handcuffed herself to the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. in protest of human rights violations in that country. I wear this at events like this to remind myself that if a tween girl can set off on her own to Alabama to speak up for what is right, then I can come to Columbia, South Carolina for just a few minutes to spend with y'all. I also wear it to remind myself that all human life is intertwined. If one human patch is removed, some of the beauty of this stole is removed. Removing another human patch doesn't restore the beauty. It just makes things worse. Similarly, the loss of human life and violent crime is tragic and affects the beauty of God's good creation. Removing another human life does not restore that beauty. It only causes more rips and brokenness to occur. By showing the same mercy that God shows each and every one of us, we have an opportunity to repair rather than rip apart, to heal rather than inflict more suffering. Governor McMaster and South Carolina state legislators, if none of my previous words have spoken to your hearts, I ask you to reflect on this simple question, which is on the buttons of some of us that are standing here today. Who would Jesus execute? Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Sister Pamela Smith, and I'm here representing the Catholic Diocese of Charleston. It probably is no secret that we Catholics consider ourselves resoundingly pro-life. And most people understand that in terms of our forthright opposition to abortion and euthanasia. What seems to be less known is that the Catholic Church stands firmly against capital punishment. It's an article in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Now, I have to admit that Catholics, with many other Christians, for not only decades but centuries, certainly tolerated capital punishment and believed that it was sometimes necessary to protect people, to eliminate violence, and so on. But what we have learned after decades and centuries of reflection is that it doesn't accomplish that, and it need not be the means to accomplish the protection of people. We look at Jesus as our Savior and recognize that he himself was an innocent victim of capital punishment. We also find that from the Sermon on the Mount and from his personal actions, that he emphasized not only the pursuit of justice, but acts of mercy. And we believe in the dignity of all human beings, no matter what their state in life, and we believe that human beings are not defined by the worst choices they have ever made. But we've learned some other things, especially in recent decades. One is that when you study capital punishment, what you find is that it is more likely to be the punishment given to members of racial minorities, ethnic minorities, poor people, and people who are mentally challenged in one way or another. There is clear evidence of that very disproportionate allocation of capital punishment. But we also find that there are other ways to protect society, that life sentences, life without parole, can be an effective means and less expensive than pursuing capital punishment. We have also seen the South Carolinians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty every October run a series called the Palmetto Journey of Hope. And those of us who have participated in that, as well as Catholic clergy, Catholic deacons who've been in prison ministry, have seen numerous cases where people who have committed capital crimes had genuine conversion experiences and became ministers to other people in prison and to other people they met. We have seen that that can happen with remarkable frequency. So when we come to you today and appeal to the governor and the state legislature to simply stop killing people who have killed people or have committed some sort of capital crime. We're really asking you to enter into the spirit of Jesus and to really be involved with a commitment not just to justice, but to mercy, to reform, and also to standing for human dignity rather than brutalizing our society by continuing these acts of capital punishment. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Monsignor Anthony Droz, Vicar General of the Diocese of Charleston. I work in the Bishop's office for Bishop Jacques Lafave of the Catholic Diocese of Charleston. I'm also pastor of St. Mary's Church downtown Charleston. When I think about the journey from capital punishment to another alternative, I'm always reminded of the story of a mother whose son was murdered. And as she grieved for the death of her son, she also found within her heart at the same time this incredible hatred for the young man who was her son's age. She found a deep hatred for this young man who had murdered her son. And in the course of encountering a mother's grief within this heart and this hatred for this gentleman that had murdered her son, she said that a mother's heart could not carry those two things. Either she had to give up one and embrace the other, or lose the love of her son in the process. So she decided that to preserve her grief and love for her son, that she needed to approach her son's murderer in a different way. And she decided that she would spiritually adopt him. And that in some sense, he had to become her son as well. So she visited him regularly, and it was the road to healing for both herself and for this young man who killed her son. The path to other alternatives, sometimes our paths are too cerebral, but the heart of a mother can give us an instruction, because the heart of Jesus gives us an instruction on this issue. So for both the victim and perpetrator, there's another way to go. And that's why we people of good faith gather this day, to offer another perspective on this issue, which is life-changing for all of us.
Good morning. My name is Minister Mustafa, and I'm here today in collaboration with this movement, because this is what this is, a movement, to address not only Governor McMaster, but the legislative body, as we already heard. We have to ask ourselves a question in regards to the moral conscience of our legislative body. I'm reminded in 1944, a young man by the name of George Steeny, who was executed for something that we know today and we knew then that he never done. He never done. A few weeks ago, there was a gentleman executed. Evidence said he did not do it. But the question is, who gives our legislative body here in South Carolina, Governor McMaster and the legislature, because the legislature has to endorse this, who gives them the power and authority to take a life? Who gives them that? We have to question their moral conscience. In 1944, it was a wrongful execution. And unfortunately today, it's the same thing. The atmosphere has not changed. The atmosphere has not changed. We need a call to action for all the citizens here in South Carolina. to begin to organize, and mobilize, and begin to get public servant leaders who serve the people, who believe in God. Because it's obvious, the leadership that we have today is very obvious that it's not for the people. It's a sad commentary for us to have to be here today. Very sad. When we take a look at history and we see the execution that has taken place here in South Carolina, majority of them happen to be African Americans. Nothing has changed. We're talking about a system that is still racist, one-sided. But as a social justice and a human rights advocate, when you look at the government leadership, we must, the citizens in South Carolina must begin to understand that we cannot continue to have leadership as Governor McMaster and those legislators. And we must emphasize the legislators because they endorse these executions. Nobody has said anything about the last execution, knowing that the evidence proves that he did not do it. Knowing that, and here we stand again. Why do we have to even come here and plead and ask the governor and the legislative body to stop this execution, to stop this killing? Who give this governor, who give the legislative body the right to want to kill a human being? What if it was their loved ones? What would they do then? So we will not stop this movement. We would press on. We would press on. I'm a bit disappointed because this whole place should be full of religious, righteous individuals. This whole place should be full. And this is why it's so important that we must stand here and stand. Because again, November the 1st is planned for another execution. We have folks who've been wrongfully convicted, who's been in prison for eon years, but yet though the government moves not. So we know why they executed Jesus, because he confronted the government. And we will continue to confront the government until we get the right government for the people, by the people, of the people. Thank you very much.
The death penalty is a system which impacts people across different faith backgrounds. We stand here today as South Carolinians and as faith leaders addressing our governor. We are also here to ask other faith leaders to join our movement and to sign our petition asking Governor McMaster to stop pursuing executions. There are only 9 other states that have executed more people than South Carolina. Our state has executed 283 people since 1912 and has the distinct shame of executing, as it has been mentioned. George Stinney Jr., the youngest person to be executed in U.S. history, he was only 14 years old. What's more, 60% of South Carolina's death penalty cases are resentenced to prison terms because of instructional errors, evidence errors, prosecutorial misconduct, and ineffective legal representation. Across the country, 200 people have been exonerated from death row since 1976. That means for every 8 people sentenced to death, 1 person is innocent. As religious and spiritual leaders in South Carolina, we are not calling for persons charged with violent offenses to be released from prison without consequence. We are simply asking that state-sanctioned murder not be part of the consequence. Executions eliminate any possibility for the offender to be held accountable for the crimes they have caused. And so now we will walk over as faith leaders to Governor McMaster's administrative assistant, ask to meet with Governor McMaster, and attempt to give the petition to him. Afterwards, you will be available for questions. Colleagues, if you will follow colleagues and friends. Just where we were. Turn it around to the dash.